with love of country in their hearts, common sense in their brains, and working class in their veins. They're winning back America, one conversation at a time. This is Red, Right, and Real with Bella D'Angelo and A.K. Kamara.
AK, where are you? There you are. Nice job on the video. So we are continuing to have technical improvements here. Eric Tollefson, hello, Purebloods. Hello, Eric Tollefson. We've got a great show. AK Kamara here and Bella D'Angelo, formerly the Bella D'Angelo Show, joining forces, Red, Right, and Real. And we've got a great show today because we've got a great guest, a great American patriot, Lisa McDuell Hanson, who recently has made the headlines, and she's been on some really major broadcasts, Newsmax, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, and just most recently, I was driving along, doing my outside sales job that I do, and I was listening to another talk show, and he said, if anybody knows the grandma in Minnesota that got arrested, and AK, would that have brought Lisa's name to your mind when you heard that?
It would have, maybe not specifically the grandma part, but if you would have said the business owner that was chased down and arrested, I would automatically say, yep, that's Lisa Hanson.
Yeah, Lisa does not even look like she's old enough to be a grandma. But when I heard it on it was actually Mike Gallagher's show, and he wanted to get in touch with her. And I thought, well, I know how to get a hold of her. She's on Facebook and Messenger. So I messaged her, and then I called the studio right away and got them connected. Here's the thing. I was out and about today. I'm going to bring Lisa on here in a second. AK, I don't know how much polling you've been doing. I was at McDonald's and I was at Best Buy. I now have these earbuds today, so I don't have the big muffs covering my head. I probably asked 20-year-old young adults. I tell them I'm doing a survey. I'm doing a conservative podcast in the evening. I want to know if they're voting Trump or Kamala. Hands down, not one Kamala vote today out of 20-year-olds.
I think that's good. I love your man on the street polls. My polling metric is a little bit different. I like to read the published polls, but I will say that I have had a decent amount of man on the street, but it's kind of biased. I've been out at the Republican Party of Minnesota State Fair booth.
That's right.
And I've been out there 3 times since State Fair started. And listen, on the night that I believe it was Blake Shelton or one of those country guys started to sing, they were performing at the grandstand. We had a lot of young people that were in the booth, a lot of different people that, again, kind of break against the norm of what people would consider a Republican. So just in and of itself, that I think is a good showing. Plus the sheer volume of the fire Walz, not Tim Walz, fans that were being passed out by, I think it's Action for Liberty. They're the ones that are passing those little fans out, and those are everywhere. So I think that that's also a good metric of how many people in our booth, the Republican Party Minnesota booth, just booming. People constantly through it. Sometimes you'd get a wave and you'd have 80 people in the booth and just packed, people waiting in line to check out because we're selling merchandise. So there's that. Now, before I continue any further, I just want to remind people, hit the like button. Make sure that you hit the share button as well so you can share it with your friends and family. Help jig the algorithm, as we say it, whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching this on Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I said last week I want to try and get 10 subscribers. We only got 2. So again, even if you're going to watch this on Facebook or something, just go over to the YouTube page, and it's youtube.com/@red, right, and real, and make sure to subscribe there. And then lastly, before getting back to your point there, Bella, just make sure that you guys show some love in the comments. We're at the end of the show. We're going to read some comments. And if my video is choppy, the internet has been out up here in Forest Lake. Midco is our internet provider since yesterday.
Yeah,
so I am tethering to my cell phone. And so if I'm a little bit frozen or choppy, that's why.
You're good. One thing that I promise moving forward as we're gaining listenership, this show signature has always been about a lot of humor, and I promise to bring that back. Also, because of technical issues, we were not able to share, and I'll just leave this as a teaser. Sharpies on balls. Okay. We're going to have a whole educational series on Sharpies on balls. It was actually during the height of COVID. It was at a tennis match where the fear of the spread of COVID, they instituted writing with a Sharpie on tennis balls. So we'll add that piece of nonsense next time in the show, as well as many of my antics that I like to bring to the program to get people listening, learning, engaged, and doing our part to fight, baby, fight. And I want to set this up properly because Lisa is a fighter, and she wants to bring her message to not only the state of Minnesota, but to the greater public. Get the story out of who the real Tim Walz is. Lisa suffered at the hands of Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison because, unfortunately, Lisa was so shameful in running a business, the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And Lisa was not only attacked, she was arrested. And then when she tried to plead and defend herself, she was held in contempt of court. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the program tonight. How are you, dear?
I am doing so good. Thank you, Bella. Thank you, AK, for having me on. I really appreciated getting this opportunity to tell my story. America needs to know about Tim Walz.
Absolutely. So you were on the program back in 2021 when we were battling the initial fight, and never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that we would be looking at, and I will keep this clean because we want this show promoted an awful lot, because back in the day I had some colorful words describing flannel Timmy Walz, but never did I imagine. And I know that I repeated this, or it's a repeat from when you and I did show prep, but I really didn't know anything about Tim until COVID. I was a nationalist, and then nothing really became that disturbing until the lockdown, the mask mandate, and then all the insanity of the ridiculous rules, unconstitutional rules that were thrown at us from you can't have anybody that isn't related to you in the boat when you went on the fishing opener, no more than 10 people at Christmas. You have to stand outside and knock on the window if you want to visit relatives or your grandma or grandparents. And then the insanity to go after the business owners. You were on the show before, but I was so pleased when I heard you on the national networks getting able to get out and share the story, because the thing is, we've got to get people. So I was driving in tonight. The really most important thing that a lot of people don't understand is the Democrats have been able to literally insert their candidate, and she is getting away without interviews and explaining the far, far radical platform that they are on. Tim Walz is actually far left of Kamala Harris. Your comment on Mike Gallagher was he will do what he did to Minnesota to this country if they are elected. So, Lisa, I'm going to hand it to you to tell your story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, back in 2020, we were all taken by surprise, shocked. We'd never been through anything like that before, as far as the announcement of COVID. And, the executive order came down from Tim Walz. I believe it had to have been an executive order, that very first one. 2 weeks, he said, 2 weeks to, and then we could reopen. Oh, thank you. Flatten the curve. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Well, 2 weeks turned into 2.5 months. And even at 2.5 months, we were still not fully opened. I have a dine-in business. So what was closed down? It's really important to remember these things. The businesses that were closed down were bars and restaurants, dance studios, nail, hair salons, those types of businesses. The businesses that were allowed to stay open, in stark contrast, were the big box stores where hundreds and hundreds of people would gather at any given time of the day, such as Walmart, Target, etc. Home Depot, right? Those are the big box stores. Also, Governor Walz said, well, you know what? The liquor stores can stay open because they're essential. And of course, we have to have the strip clubs open because they're essential, right?
Pawn shops were open.
Pawn shops, candy store. Remember the big candy store that he allowed to remain open because they're essential. So, wow, this thing was looking, even from the very beginning, it was looking really odd. And we knew, it's like, wait a sec. The governor does not have the authority, number one, constitutional or otherwise, to make a law. He cannot create law. That's the legislator's job. So here he was basically saying, instituting or implementing a law, which was a mandate, an emergency executive order, which actually does not apply to the people, directly does not apply to the people. Yes, it does apply to certain people. Those people would be the people that work for him in the executive branch, the state entities, agencies, et cetera, et cetera. The Attorney General's office. So as we all know, wonderful Attorney General Keith Ellison, another horrible man, a tyrant, right up there with Governor Walz. They got together. All of these people are in lockstep together. Every person that was a part of those shutdowns has to take the responsibility. I hope at some point they become or that we can hold them accountable. So in the very beginning, we consented to this shutdown because we had no idea what it was.
Right.
This pandemic.
Well, and I want to jump in real quick, Lisa, because people also, one of the, fear is the most driving emotion that human beings have. And, in the very beginning, unfortunately, one of the things that happened was many people did not take a step back and say, is this constitutional, or asking what I have brought up, when your government prevents you from life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the ability to work and feed your family and earn an income. And unfortunately, it came in so fast and so hard. There were people that stood back and asked common sense questions to protect ourselves. And I know that one of your things is, you wish looking back, you'd kind of, had that opportunity. But there were also, if I remember right, there were heavy consequences if you went against specifically the first lockdown. Because I remember Chris from Shady's Bar and Grill up in Albany, Minnesota, Larvita out in the western part. There were so many, but it was targeting small businesses, which I think that because you were willing to fight, that's why they really went after you. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is right. I think because I was outspoken about what I was doing, but now, so we're jumping ahead to November of 2020. And that's when the rest of the country was basically opened or opening up, and Walz was shutting us down again, fully 100% dine-in. And we happen to have a dine-in, like many of the folks in Minnesota that were affected by this, primarily dine-in restaurants. So obviously we could not survive. We didn't survive. My husband and I dumped our own money into, the business just to be able to try to keep it open. By the time the second shutdown came, I looked at my husband and I said, there's no way we can continue to operate like this. Obviously, they're trying to destroy us. So I have two options. I can either close my business, lock the door, sell everything, walk away, be done with it, pay off the debt. Or the other option I had, which was constitutionally protected, is to open up fully. And so that's what I did. We were, go ahead.
Lisa, sorry. I just want to jump in real quick. So I think it's important for listeners and our viewers to understand that you were just simply a Minnesotan that was trying to, make a living doing something that my understanding is you've done a lot of. You've ran businesses your whole life, buying, selling businesses. So you didn't start this thing trying to be some patriot warrior that was going to be just defiant of the government. You were just literally trying to run a business and have a livelihood. So as we kind of move into this, I want people to understand that these types of moves against people like yourself that are common sense, everyday Minnesotans, you're not trying to be overtly political. You're just trying to operate a business and a public service and good, which is feeding people and providing them with entertainment. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there. But yeah, continue from you get this overbearing, executive order comes back into play. We're in November now of 2020. The rest of the country is opening back up, and Minnesota's going right back into a lockdown. And you make this choice. What was that? What really pushed you forward? Why did you decide to do like so many others didn't and say, no way, I'm going to stand here and let you destroy my business without me at least trying a little bit?
Yeah, and thank you for, I am just a regular American, just, regular wife, mom, grandma, business person, just want to run our businesses, grow our family, and worship our God and be left alone. Really, we're just regular people. I've never been involved in activism per se before that. I have been involved with the Republican Party previous to that. And sometimes, there were different levels of my involvement over the years, never heavily involved. So this was all new to me. I mean, we were like everybody else. We're too busy, right, to get involved. And then all of a sudden, here it is knocking at my door. So the reason what got me to say, okay, we have to do this, because we knew that the state was not going to be real happy with us. Two things. I did what I did because I knew it was the right thing to do. And that's something that I don't know, that I'm wired. I guess I'm wired with doing the right thing is what I have to do. The right thing. Doing the right thing is the right thing to do. The other part of it is like, if we let this governor get away with this, because that's exactly what it was. He was getting away with violating the people's rights. If we let him get away with this, what does this leave for our grandchildren and future generations? And I thought, also, the other big part of it was, what about the founders of our country? What about the sacrifice? They paid a huge, heavy price to make this country a republic as at what it is. I know we could talk on that for hours, but
let me jump in really quick too, because the other thing that was being discussed amongst so many of us was, to your point, if he gets away with it this time, what's going to prevent him from any other time? He could have pulled, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but people were throwing away things like, what if they want to do a shutdown to affect an election, or a shutdown over climate change, or whatever whim. And then the other part was, we were gaining national attention for the length that he was holding on to that emergency power and the draconian measures that the whole state was being subjected to. I remember when Rush Limbaugh made the comment that, Minnesota was becoming nationally known for this draconian style government that was hanging on and literally torturing and destroying the state and the livelihood and people.
Yeah, all kinds of businesses. People lost their livelihood. Businesses that closed down, many of them never reopened. I wish I had that number. I've asked for the number, and we still haven't been able to get that number. But he was destroying people's lives. He was closing churches. He was closing schools. It was draconian. I say Tim Walz is a tyrant of tyrants. He is one of the worst kinds of tyrants. We had no idea that, like you said, Bella, earlier in the show, that he was going to, when he was first elected, we all thought he was kind of moderate. Not so much at all.
A leader's true colors. Hang on one second, AK. I just want to make this point, and then you can grab it. A leader's true colors come into play in emergency. Now, to me, my opinion is different than some about COVID, but I will give you this. At the time when it first came out, it appeared as an emergency. And instead of dialing back, as their beautiful term was, it's slowing the curve, or scarf lady. I think she always said dialing back. Scarf lady drove me crazy. But, Jay Dugan, we've talked about, I mean, we have the Mayo Clinic. We have so many of these medical, institutions that we could have dealt with it differently. But the way that I watched it all play out, it was politically driven. It was also driven to diminish the middle class and small business owners and play to the big box. And then it was completely political, but it became very personal. That's why I reached out to you and so many others, because you all had personal stories. And I want to get to the personal side of this, because you were attacked more than others, and you actually served time. And it was, and that's why your story became where it did. It got to the national level, because this has to be taken seriously. Because again, as you said, he will do what he did to Minnesota to the country if he is elected, him and Kamala.
Absolutely. And that is our concern. And I'm sorry, AK, did you want to jump in there and
Yeah, I
say
just
something?
wanted to, I was like, I'm a storyteller, and I like to always assume that there's going to be people that watch this that don't know your story. And so I think
Okay.
setting this up, that here you are, yes, you maybe showed up at a precinct meeting from time to time, but you're not like this die-hard Republican activist of activists. You're running your business. COVID happens. You're like, you know what? We're going to take some of the guidance. You already know, like, intuitively, that this is already overreach by a tyrannical, a mindset of tyranny that was coming from Governor Tim Walz and the rest of the DFL. And so here we're at a point where they reinstitute the lockdowns. It sounds like you were able to kind of limp through the first round of lockdowns that happened. And now here we are in November. They lock it down again, and you and your husband make this decision that we're going to stay open. Kind of walk us through that process. And then again, I think Bella kind of alluded to it, to go from you decide to defy the order. And I know that there's some back and forth, and I'll kind of jump in to kind of clarify some things, but kind of walk us through when you made that decision to stay open and what that process was like.
Yeah. So, and honestly, again, we were really grasping for straws, not really knowing what to do. I think when you're put in a position, we've never been in that position before, although we'd run businesses for decades. You're also scrambling because the whole world has been turned upside down, right? So my husband's business, that one we were also trying to keep alive. That was considered an essential business. However, apparently his employees were essential. So it was a really, really difficult time in so many ways for so many Americans, for so many Minnesotans. And there were, Lisa Monet is, a lot of people know her story as well. She was, she was abused absolutely by the system and by Governor Walz, Keith Ellison. We made the decision. There was an organization, and I believe, I can't remember for sure, but I believe the name of the organization was Open Minnesota. Do you remember, Bella?
Reopen Minnesota.
Reopen
Yeah.
Minnesota. Thank you. Okay.
With Darius. Yep.
Yes, we talked about that, didn't we? So,
Yep.
That came along. It was offered to me as a business owner, and I said, this is what we've been looking for. I felt it was very well put together, et cetera. So we got on board with that, as well as about 200 of us in total got on board with that. And we opened up. I'm not sure. I don't remember the day in December of 2020, but we opened up. All of us did. We all got that call from the state, or at least the majority of us did. And it was to scare us. The call was to scare us, to get us to shut back down. Unfortunately, it worked. All but about 10 of us, give or take, shut back down. I was one that didn't shut back. I was one that stayed open, remained open. Larvita, Lisa Monet, Jane Moss, I believe, is in there as well, and a few others. So we stayed open, and within about 24 hours, I think it was, the state came at us with all the resources they have. There was only 10 of us. Think about that. If 200 had remained open, the state would not have been able, it would have been overwhelming.
Well, think about this.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of add. Oh, go ahead, Bella.
think about this. So I was at the Reopen Minnesota meeting up at Willie McCoy's up in Champlin. And one of the big concerns was that Darius was explaining that he wanted to send out that list so that people knew who to support. Now, let's think about all this. We, as private citizen business owners, are meeting, trying to fight the government for the right to conduct business, to earn income during a alleged pandemic that in the end was literally, this, it was not a pandemic. I have my views. Scott Jensen has been on this program many, many times. He debunked the COVID numbers. If we would have done the things that we should have done. So, we're battling against the government for our life and liberty. We're hiding behind closed doors trying to plan this thing. The argument was, don't put out the list so that, because what they didn't want was, they didn't want a list for Ellison and Walz to go after. So the very thing that we're trying to do is promote the businesses to reopen. I mean, this is just absolute banana republic, Marxism, communism that we're trying to battle to keep our business open. So set that stage. So the list goes out. Only 10 of you remain open, and they target you.
Yeah. So they target me. They immediately issue me a cease and desist. I didn't obey because I didn't have to, according to the Constitution. They then came at me again with this is where they started throwing all the lawsuits at me. It was crazy. I'd never been through anything like this before. Was it scary? Yeah, it was scary. A lot of people say, I was brave or courageous, and thank you for that. But it was scary. I had no idea really, what was going to happen. We ended up closing down. I think it was 6 days later after they had given us the cease and desist, because of the pressure that they were putting on us. We needed to be able to get our feet under us and fight them back, or fight. That's not how I want to say it, but they were trying to shut us down. And I had what I believe it was 5 civil suits against me and 2 criminal lawsuits against me, 2 criminal charges. And obviously they want to make an example out of me. No, news medias were showing up, mostly local, like you mentioned earlier. Bella, there was only a couple of nationals that covered my story. Otherwise, it was all local. Quite the opposite this time. And I'm thankful for that. So here they are. They're coming at me. The person, a friend of the family who I was working with, as far as he was helping us write my documents and so forth. And he said, listen, they're coming at you with everything they've got. Is there any way that would you consider closing just so we can get our feet under us? And so I acquiesced to that, and I really don't know any other way to have done it. So there we are. We finally closed down, and now the litigation begins, and everything else that came with that. It was unbelievable, the things that happened. I could literally write a book, you guys, on. It's very complicated. It's convoluted. There is so
to help
much.
to help the listeners and keep this moving along. So you close.
I closed.
What are they coming after you with? What are the lawsuits? What are they threatening you with?
Right. Well, they because I did not close down right away with their cease and desist, because I challenged them. That's what they were coming after me for. As far as the criminal charges, it was criminal charges against me. I believe there was 6 criminal charges, violating the governor's emergency executive orders, and I believe it was 5, violating the executive orders, and 1 for public nuisance.
That's so insane. So when they started to come after you for this, did you sense, I know you said earlier that, they wanted to make an example out of you. Did you sense that there was any kind of olive branch that they were willing, because like there's this narrative, right, that gets pushed by the left, by Democrats mostly, of like, you know, if you're a first time offender, they're going to kind of go light on you. But it's the opposite with you, right? Like you're this unassuming person. I've watched a few of your interviews and you say, you know, I guess maybe you had a speeding ticket when you were a teenager, but beyond that, like you are just, again, like you're just trying to operate your business and you had the audacity to obey the order. What were they charging you criminally with? Was it a violation of like public health code or something like that? Like what was the criminal violation?
Yeah, the criminal violation was stated as violating the governor's emergency executive order, the COVID-19 lockdown order. So that's what that was.
So it's like a circular argument because you're asserting that these executive orders don't have constitutional power because they don't, because it's not correct. It's not, again, it's an executive order meant for emergency situations, but then turning it into like this arm that you can execute. So it's like they're saying you violated that order, and so therefore you're in violation of law, which ironically you're not, because it's not law.
Exactly.
Right? So
it's not law.
It's so absurd.
Well, I guess I wish I would have been standing there, because I would have said, so how in the hell are the big box stores and everybody else open? I mean, I just.
You almost,
sometimes
you get to
you lose your words, right?
Yeah, you're speechless. This makes no sense. It made no sense. And when we look, why does that guy get to be open, but I have to be closed? So obviously we know that they had an agenda behind all of this. This is not Walz trying to keep us safe, the state of Minnesota. We know there was an agenda behind this, and I have my own theories on it, but we don't need to get into any of that right now. The facts remain the same. So Walz did not have the authority to do what he did. The emergency executive order did not give him the authority to direct and control the people's lives. We know that. And we could go into other things here, and I don't want to get into too much rabbit trailing here, because I know we only have so much time. So if you want, what we did is we started going to court. We started fighting these lawsuits that were against us. I've never read so much legalese in all my life. Their documents coming to us, crazy, insane, our documents going back to them, and naming their violations against the law, naming their violations against the people, being me specifically. So all of this, we never got answers. They never answered our documents. They were very vague at best in if you want to even call it an answer, which you can't. So we're litigating, going through court. And finally we get to the trial, the jury trial. It was a jury of 6. And that started, that was in very, very early December of 2020. It was about a 4-day trial. The really crazy thing, there's so many crazy things through this whole thing. Pre-trial, the judge and the prosecuting attorney, have the pre-trial rules all written up, and they look pretty standard, except for one. That was the one that stated that Ms. Hanson would not be allowed to speak of any law, constitutional, statutory, or case law, in front of the jurors. Now, this happened to be my defense. That was my whole defense, or a very large portion of it. I objected, of course. We submitted an objection. It didn't matter. In an American court of law, I did not get to speak of constitutional, statutory, or case law. None of it. And we know why.
About that. Here's what makes the least amount of sense, and especially for people to understand this, right? Like, we literally are given the right to stand accused, right? And we are innocent until proven guilty. And I can understand that if your attorney was trying to introduce a legal theory and, it gets challenged and they say this is not admissible, but to stop you from giving your actual testimony, like you have the right to either not, you can plead the fifth, right, and say nothing, or you can actually go and testify. And for the judge to say, but you can't say this, it's like, well, this is part of what you're saying. You're not even necessarily in that instance trying to enter it. And it's fascinating. Here's what I just want to do for the sake of time. I think it's important also to kind of go into, you're in this trial, you have this crazy moment where the judge is saying that you basically can't speak, you can't actually defend yourself. And then we fast forward And here you are looking at the sentence. And I think that people need to understand the resources that the state spent to quote unquote come after you because you were on the lam. I just remember all the ridiculous phrasing of this, but they, made it seem like you're just like you're Jesse James or you're Al Capone, right?
Right.
Can you kind of walk us through like how that happened, how that transpired, and how like scary it was, if it was, of like that you're being tracked down by this, it's like you're a wanted fugitive on the run for doing some heinous crime.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so just a couple of things. I did not have an attorney. All the attorneys in the state of Minnesota were losing for their clients. We figured, well, if it's going to go that way for us, we can do that on our own. And I'm kind of joking there, but just to clarify on that, there was no attorney. I handled my own case in the court, and with help, of course, friends and so forth. And the other thing was contempt of court. I was not held in contempt of court. I was threatened to be held in contempt of court if I would speak about law in front of the jurors. I did attempt to do this because, again, that was my defense. And I was shut down immediately and threatened again not to speak of that in front of the jurors. So I just wanted to make those things clear. So as far as the arrest, I've never been arrested in my life. It was scary. And at this time, everything was just nothing made any sense. There was no rhyme or reason. The Attorney General Keith Ellison had threatened Larvita McFarquhar with sending her to a work camp of all things, and that never happened. But there was crazy things going on, so it was very scary. I was arrested, and people say that I will say this: I did my best to avoid an invalid arrest. I had documentation with me. I knew that I was going to be, they were going to arrest me at some point, and I gave the arresting officers the chance to not get involved with this because you are violating your oath by getting involved. That's another long story. So I was arrested in Clear Lake, Minnesota. What we had done is we waited around at our house in Minnesota, waiting for them to come while we're working on all these cases. It's overwhelming. We're reading hours and hours and hours every day. And that's no exaggeration. We're working on our documents. I did all my own filing. I did everything as far as the logistical part of it. That was all on me. I had to learn it all. So we're there at the house and we're working, and we know that they've got a warrant out for our arrest. By the way, I talked with the sheriff and the chief of police about it in Freeborn County, Albert Lee, and told them, hey, there should be no warrant for the arrest, and this is why. They weren't following their own rules of criminal procedure 3.0. Again, another long story. No one would protect me. The sheriff and the chief of police had no interest in protecting me from a rogue judge. They were scared of the judge. I don't know what was going on there. So we were sitting around waiting to get arrested, and they didn't come. And so we decided we're working on my case. And is there anything that says I can't leave the state? Because we'd really like to go see my elderly parents who live in a different state. And I'd like to go see them because I hadn't seen them, AK, for almost 2 years because of COVID. Right. It was a fantastic time for us to be able to go. We left. There was nothing in the law that said I couldn't leave. Of course, we checked all that. I was even talking with the chief of police, and I believe the sheriff at that time, letting them know, no, I'm not here, but I will be back on this day. So I was not trying to hide. We were taking photographs where we were at, the location where we were at. Signage was in the photos. I wasn't trying to hide. I was just living my life and going about my business is exactly what I was doing. So unfortunately, a rumor got started about me being on the lam and whatever. Anyway, I kind of laugh about it now. So I was arrested, went to Cerro Gordo jail, and basically they booked me in. And I was out within probably, my husband was there, of course, to bail me out. I was out probably within an hour, 2 hours. I can't remember exactly. So that was my first time being arrested. And it was quite the experience. And then from there, we continued. That was quite a while before the trial happened. So then we get to December, the trial happens, and I am found, again, not allowed to present any of my defense, not allowed to talk about law. You know, I think I could have hung the jury. I think I probably could have hung the jury if I had been able to speak about my defense. The jurors came back and found me guilty on all charges after the judge had spoken with them and basically told them the law and how they needed, in my estimation, this is my opinion, I don't have facts, but the way that everything else went through this whole trial, this court, here the trial, the hearings prior, everything. I'm pretty confident that there was no way I was going to be walking out of that courtroom a free woman that day. So the sentencing came down upon me immediately, and I was whisked off to jail immediately. No opportunity to put my affairs in order or show up for jail at a later date. While murderers and while other criminals of lesser crimes were being let back out on the streets. I'm being put in jail for sentenced to 90 days and $1,000 fine. Later on, we got the $1,000 fine back because that was a double sentencing. The judge was so excited to get me behind bars that I think he just forgot to read the penalty. It was either or. So sentenced to jail for 90 days. I served 60, got out on good behavior. Imagine that, a dangerous criminal like me getting out 30 days early on good behavior.
Yeah, I think the thing that's so absurd when you kind of take a bigger picture is that it shows to what lengths and extent you can have a government that is so bought into pushing a narrative that they would go so hard after someone who just simply kept their business open. And I think the part that I don't know how you feel about this, because there's time that you have that you'll never get back. Terrible experiences that I imagine you had to go through. Going to jail sounds like it would never be fun. I was a juvenile, and I was a pretty rough kid, so I went to juvie jail. But it's for kids, and there's a bunch of different standards versus going to adult jail. And so there's all of these things. But I feel like if people truly understood how we got to the process in which you have a governor who has these just honestly like tyrannical executive powers, that's able to basically say, I'm the God King of Minnesota and you will follow my edict. I will pick and choose which businesses stay open. I will pick and choose which people are going to be exposed to COVID, because we've talked about that. I will pick and choose that we're going to shut down these businesses. We're going to keep these businesses open. And there's no rhyme or reason, but if you defy our orders, we will lock you up. We will throw you in jail. We will harm you by throwing a bunch of legal stuff at you to take up your time, your energy, so everyone else stays compliant. And I think there's two things I just wanted to mention, and then Belle, I'll throw it to you, and then we can kind of let Lisa go on with her day. But I think that it's important for people to understand that putting this into its proper context, if you defy the government, bad things are going to happen. Two, when people tried to stand together, you're right. If everyone would have stood together, there just would not have been enough manpower. They would have tried to pick off a few people here and there. And then number three, you mentioned it, the law enforcement. And I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement. But there are times in which we have law enforcement that enforce wrong orders and actions. And if they would say, I'm not going to do it, sure, you could say, well, we'll find someone that will come and arrest you. But that's the other thing. I think there's so many lessons to learn that hopefully if this ever, God forbid it never happens again, but if this ever happens again, that people have learned their lesson, that if you stand together united, we have so much power, because at the end of the day, laws are meant for people that want to live in a just society, that agree to these rules and laws. If no one is agreeing to the rules and laws, then we actually have the power, and we can challenge it in the legal process and the court process, but we have to learn to stand together. So I just think that your story, as I'm sure traumatic as it was for you to go through it, I think is a really good message to show other people of A, how tyrannical Tim Walz is, B, that there is a power that if we stand together, this probably would not have happened to you in any way, shape, or form the way that it did. And then C, just again, people need to learn to stand on what they value. And if they don't, you're going to be chewed up by the machine. But go ahead, Bella, I want to kick it over to you, and then we'll probably give Lisa some closing thoughts, anything that she wants people to be aware of, any websites she wants people to go and visit. And that'd be fantastic.
Now, you juxtapose how Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, handled they remained open. Ron DeSantis, his handling of it. I'll give you closing thoughts, but the one thing that I want before you leave, Lisa, is when this thing first started, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh, and I remember when he said, do you remember what happened when H1N1 blew through? And I specifically remember because I was making my plans to move to Williston, North Dakota to go work in the oil field. And the thing is, and we talked about this in prep, you know, when you're in an election cycle, you've got an election coming up, the presidential election, especially as the true disruptor Trump represents to the establishment in both parties, Democrat and Republican. Okay. So immediately flags went up for me that this was some politically driven. I don't deny there was COVID. There was COVID, but it was not handled the way that my common sense told me it should have been handled. You wake up, one day it was impeach, impeach, impeach. The next minute it was COVID, COVID, COVID. And the stickers on the holiday gas stations were already there for 6 feet apart, which was insanity to me. I immediately sought advice from a constitutional attorney. I immediately reached out to people like Big Al, Chris Schiffler of Shady's. I followed your story. I went out to Larvitas when they were doing some fundraising. She's a single mom with daughters. And the stories of all of you guys that were fighting, that's why these stories have to come out, because when a government uses control and the level of control that Walz was implement, I faced it, and this is, I'll share the story later on, but with the own care of my own mother and the laws, the rules that were being implemented just to visit my own mother. So, Lisa, again, I'm so thrilled that you've gotten national attention. You've got your story out. What are your closing thoughts? And then we'll take the show from here. And thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you again to both of you for having me on and allowing me to share my story. You know, Amy Klobuchar, Senator Amy Klobuchar said it really well the other night when she gave the speech. This is the only part of her speech that I agreed with. She said, Walz will do the same for the nation as he has done for Minnesota. And I thought, yep, he will. That's why he needs to not, his ticket needs to not get elected. He and Harris need to not be elected because of what he has done to Minnesota. Egregious bills have been signed, that he has signed, that are destructive to human beings' lives. He is a extreme radical tyrant at best. He's a liar, and he doesn't care about the people. He doesn't care about his oath of office that he swore to. He has violated it over and over and over again. So how about the quote that he says, mind your own darn business? He's quoted, you know, we've been hearing that. He said, are you kidding me? Mind your own business? Why didn't he mind his own business? Remember, the governor works for the people, not the other way around. And remember when he mandated masks? And now he's talking about freedom of healthcare decisions. Don't believe anything he says. He's a liar. He's a tyrant. He doesn't care about people. We cannot allow this man. We Minnesotans, right, guys? We Minnesotans, I know personally what this man, the evil this man can orchestrate. When you put that evil together with the evil Kamala Harris, what do you get? You get evil on steroids. They will destroy our country. Mark my words, and everybody else is saying the same thing. These two will destroy our country. So again, we've got to do our best to make sure these guys don't get elected. Lots of prayer, because we need the Lord. We need the Lord like never before. And we've always needed the Lord. So we need the Lord. So get involved, make a difference. Don't be afraid. If you've got the Lord on your side, the Lord will take care of you. He took care of me through this whole thing. It was awful, yes, but the Lord was with me. And there was a lot of good that has come out of it as well. So thank you guys so much for having me on. And I just wish you both the best.
Thank you, Lisa, so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I honestly, Bella, sometimes in the course of our show, it is so difficult to try and cram everything into one episode. It's like we almost have to have like a series, right? Because just even within Lisa's story, I think there's so many other things that we could have kind of delved a little bit further into to truly encapsulate and understand. Because when we hear stories, you know, sometimes the way that the story is told to us has a specific goal and end. So we kind of hyper fixate on that. And we look past so many other details. But just to imagine the layers and the determination it took by the government to go after this one business that dared to just stay open, what she said, a total of 6 days, 5 or 6 days. And like, let's be honest, how many people were coming through her store? Like I hope that she was able to get some decent business out of it. But I mean, it's a wine and bistro, right? That's what it is, like wine and coffee bistro. They couldn't have had thousands of people coming through. I wish they would have. But to imagine they would spend that kind of energy all just to prove a point is just, it's fascinating, but it shows you the mentality, because Walz could have shut it down.
I mean, the only point that they were proving was their tyrannical, draconian level of control. And I fully believe, and we talked about this, and this brings up so many memories from back in 2020 and 2021 when I was trying to get people to understand, in many ways, it was a form of a test. How much can they get away with? That's why the big fear was, and we see it. There's comments on our chat group that say they're going to do it again. No, they're not going to get away with doing it again, because so much of the country has woken up. They won't get anywhere with it. There was ramblings when that monkeypox or something that was coming out, or the flying pig flu. I don't know, but all I know is this: is that I was driving around today and I had a conversation with Rick and Kim Fox, which I want to ask our listening audience. The power of prayer is real. Please send some prayers for Rick and Kim Fox. The thing is we've now got someone that's been put into position with, I mean, literally just injected into the seat of running for the nomination of President of the United States, who, if they get away with it, much like what happened with Lisa, law will not be followed, policy will not be understood, and we will literally be electing Obamacare. Do you know what I mean? And let me explain that.
Yeah.
When when Pelosi said we got to pass it so that we can figure out what it is, we got to elect her, and then you'll figure out who the hell she is and he is, because the fear is, and I was just listening to Newt Gingrich on my way in, we only have so much time for the public to understand who the hell they are. Now, that's why I get inspired when I drive around and I talk to the wage earners. And I literally, kids today that are not even old enough to vote. And then when the one kid said, well, I'm not really sure, I don't know enough, I said this is as simple as I said it. Did life seem to be more optimistic and you could afford things and you felt safer and you felt like you had a leader when Trump was in office compared to now? That's as simple. Yeah. And they both said Trump. Go ahead, AK.
That's awesome. And that's the thing is, like, ultimately you're going to be able to run into all of these things that I think are really good pieces of information. Now, for instance, anyone that's going out to Minnesota State Fair, make sure that you stop by the booth. The Minnesotan, Corey Roberts is the owner. He owns the Minnesotan in White Bear Lake. He's an American, huge American supporter. He proudly flies the OG Minnesota blue flag, like our real flag, not this new weird one that they got. But I was there with Representative. Yeah, well, it's not, but I mean, it looks like it could be. But ultimately, I was there with Liz Collin and John Justice. They had a little meet and greet, and I went and showed up there. And then I sat down with Representative Walter Hudson and Representative Elliot Engen, and we shot a podcast episode just kind of talking about stuff. And we actually asked some people walking by. And I had the opposite, younger guys that said that they were going to support Harris. And the thing that was interesting is that what I found is that people that say that, it's possible that they just don't want to be shunned or something like that. But when you ask them why, there was two young men, and both of them said, "Oh, I maybe I need to learn a little bit more." And I thought that was fascinating because Alpha News, they had a reporter out at the state fair, and they asked, I believe it was 36 people, and I think it was like 17 or 16 said Trump, and like 18. So there's like two more that said Kamala. And when they asked the Trump supporters, why, they would just boom, boom, boom. They're hitting all the reasons why Trump. Almost every single one that said Walz Harris, or technically it's Harris Walz, couldn't give a reason. And they actually have a video, and it's fascinating. But this is the truth. This is the truth, is that the Democrats know that if they can just go off of vibes and feelings, and they don't have to have any critical analysis, they will win a lot of people over because they have all of the support of the corporate mainstream media that pushes narratives. But I believe that the American people, more of us have woken up than are still asleep, and it doesn't work. But I think that your man on the street is so powerful because when you're out there talking to people, you're getting this. Again, with me, I'm seeing all these numbers that it's in our favor. And I will go back. I'm going to sound like a broken record. And yes, I am, involved in the Republican Party. I'm the establishment because I'm technically the Republican National Committee man for the state of Minnesota. I'll be out at the state fair tomorrow. I'm going to try and go out there like every other day. But make sure, if you want to actually make a difference, you go to TrumpForce47.com and you get signed up so you can actually go out there and help in regards to door knocking, reaching out to people. It's how Trump campaign signs are actually being handed out this year. They're not just like, putting them in a place and people can come pick them up. You actually have to earn it. And I think that's smart. The second thing is go to protectthevote.com/Minnesota. We're trying to recruit 5,000 volunteers to be poll watchers, poll challengers, so we can have a huge force of people on election day that are in precincts all across Minnesota. Our goal is to get 5,000. Nationally, they wanted to get 100,000. They've already hit over 175,000 people that have signed up to help protect the vote. And so I think that at the end of the day is we have to put something tangible. There are things that we can do. It's not just about complaining on the internet or watching awesome podcasts and shows like Bill and I have and having awesome guests like McDuell Hanson on. But what it's about is like we have to then translate that into an action item. And by signing up at Trump Force 47 or going in and volunteering with local Republicans that are running for office, going to protect the vote and saying that you want to be there on election day in your precinct, watching for any shenanigans, that's how we actually bring this whole baby home. But yeah, I'll kick it back over to you, Bella. We're going to probably get ready to wrap up the show here. Any final thoughts, closing ideas? I think this has been a fantastic episode. Lisa is such an inspiring person in my estimation.
Yes. It started out as simple as this. Way back in 2010, I got fed up with hearing people that said that their vote didn't count. So I learned how to do a podcast. My goal was simple. I was happy if one person was listening to me. In order to promote the show, I took a couple of packs of Post-it notes, and I would write the Bella D'Angelo show on the Post-it note. When I would stand in the grocery store line or go to my favorite Subway, I hadn't discovered that McDonald's Diet Coke is the world's best Diet Coke in the world yet. So McDonald's hadn't experienced my me. And so I just went around everywhere with my Post-it note and just asked people if they were voting. That's as simple as it was. I built the listenership up into the thousands and thousands, but I was in North Dakota. The drilling rigs, the men up at the rigs really built the show and grew it. And I always will give thanks back to the guys up at the drilling rigs. I wish I could run my mouth the way that I was able to when I was out in North Dakota, but we got to keep this clean because we want to keep promoting it. But I will say this. I want to just give this, just today's example. I went to McDonald's. I gave my spiel. I said, I have a podcast. I'm doing a survey. Trump or Kamala, are you voting? Hands down. The one gentleman, he said, I'm not old enough to vote. And I said, if you were able to vote, which would it be? And he said, it's got to be Trump. I went to Best Buy. I had to get these earbuds. And the gentleman that was helping me out, I simply asked, and he said, I don't know. And I said, simply, I said, it was more affordable when Trump was in office. And he said, now that you bring that up, I run a staffing business with my mother. And he said, I think businesses would fare better with Trump. I went to the register and to close out to pay for these earbuds. 2 young Black gentlemen standing there. I said, the vote, we're voting in November. Are you voting? The one kid said, I'm not old enough. The other one said, yes. I said, which one, Kamala or Trump? They both said Trump, hands down. The reason is we have woken up. But you know what? Those of us that are making a wage, whether it's salary, hourly, commission only, however you're getting paid, your dollar is shrinking. Your enthusiasm and optimism about your future is shrinking and diminishing. I want to be a homeowner again. I talked about that earlier today with my good friend Carol Hine. I don't know if I'm going to be in an apartment or a home. I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford a home again. I'm a 4-time homeowner, and I bought nice homes and remodeled and flipped them. We're all in this together. We're all suffering at the hands of and you got to remember this, because a few lights went on today when they said they didn't know. I said, all that she would like you to believe that she is going to do on day one, she's been there. How many days since she walked into the vice president position when Biden was elected in 2020? Elected is a kind word, but this is all happy ass talk about what she's going to do if she gets into the position of power. We have to get the word out and get people understanding who these two are. It's the most radical ticket we've ever had in history. And they have now literally created history where they have literally inserted someone that if they get their way, she will not have to speak, she will not have to answer, and she is hoping that she can glide in so that she doesn't have to explain what she's going to do to the American people. But as Lisa said, what Walz did to Minnesota, he will do to the nation. What they have been what they've been doing to us since 2020, they will continue on, and it'll only get worse. AK, do you want to read any of the comments before we say goodnight?
So we got Angie Johnson. Shout out to Angie. Loved using my fan. People love them on Sunday. Talking about the fan that I think there was one that was like fire Tim Walz, or there was like different variations, or Walz failed. There's some things like that. So that was fantastic. I want to say a couple of things here. Eric Tollefson said, you have our support, Lisa. I think that really is a good sentiment expressed by so many people. You know, what she went through is, again, just, it's kind of crazy when you put it into its proper perspective, because for her to be able to know that other people stood down, but she wanted to stand up, and just to kind of see what happened. Kim Fox said, who was the judge? We need to know who these people are so they don't stay in their position. Do you know who the judge was at all? I was trying to look it up. I couldn't necessarily find it. That would have been a good question. But yeah, you know, here's the deal. I do think that there are people that should be held accountable beyond the scope of like saying like, well, if you're elected, you should have to face a challenge. And I believe that she did run for office. Lisa ran for office. And sometimes you're fighting this uphill battle and stream, but you try and do what you can. Most likely the judge that was presiding over is going to continue to be a judge, because the system empowers them. And until we, the people, decide that we're not going to allow for it to stand by voting all these people out, it's much harder to take that stand. We have Kim Farlow. We must take on loss and sacrifice for our country, for our kids, and for our grandkids. Agreed. I think, you know, there's all the adages, right? All we need for our country to fail, or for tyranny to kick in, or for communism to win, is for good men and women to do nothing. And that's the truth, right? We're a system, a culture, a society that is predicated on rule of law, but that rule of law only applies when people actually follow it. You could have every law in the book, and if every person wanted to just break that law, and we as a society just kind of agreed, yet we're not going to enforce this law, then the law doesn't have any power. And so it's important. The more that folks are willing to stand up for what is right, the less power tyrants will have. But that's what I got. Make sure that, again, you guys like this stream if you're watching this after the fact, make sure to share it on all your pages. And if you haven't had a chance, go to YouTube. And it's hard to find. If you just go and search Red, Right, and Real, you're not going to find it because we don't have a lot of subscribers. You have to literally type in youtube.com/the Red, Right, and Real, all spelled out. And you'll be able to find our YouTube page. That's what I got. I got to get out to work. Any final thoughts for you, Bella?
I just love what you mentioned earlier, because we got to get the message out, and one person can't do it by herself. And I was a one-person operation. I want to thank Rick Rice for introducing us. It came through a connection through a former boarding facility for my horse. And I really got to make some decisions, because my Facebook page, which is Bella D'Angelo, is plastered with that moose with no antlers, Hottie, my horse. And I went that direction because for the longest time, my light dimmed on trying to make a difference. It was a big struggle trying to do this podcast. It was hard finding someone to partner with me, but I believe so much in this cause, and I believe so much in this country. AK, thank you so much for joining with me. Thank you for all the advances that we're making. And thank you to all the new listeners. And really share the show, because we're just everyday people that want to take this country back and save it from what will happen if we have 4 more years of these two. And we got to get Trump in office in November to take this country back and to start turning it around, because we got to fight, baby, fight. And with that, I'm going to close it out. I'm going to say good night. God bless. God bless America. By the way, this show was approved by Yoga Hot Pants, the one and only. Good night, and God bless America.
Are you fired up? Then take action. Copy the link to this episode and text it to one friend who needs to hear it. Support us where you found us by liking and subscribing for future content. This is a grassroots production supported by listeners like you.